Okay. So Brainspotting was created by David Grand. He is he was an EMDR practitioner. Are you familiar with what that is?
No.
Okay, so EMDR is a type of trauma therapy that utilizes eye movement. That's what the EM stands for in
Ah,
EMDR, eye movement. And it utilizes eye movement moving from one side to the other side. And early on, eye movement was done using fingers like this, and you would go back and forth. Okay, and so David Grand was working with an ice skater. She was a competition ice skater, and he was working with her. She was trying to do the triple loop, and she couldn't get past the double loop to get into the triple loop as she was in the jump, and she would always lose it and she would fall out of the triple loop. And he had been working with her on some trauma that was kind of like related to that, not physical trauma, but some emotional trauma. And so he was in a session with her. She was following his fingers as he was going back and forth. And suddenly her eyes stopped. And instinctively he stopped his fingers moving. And he stayed on that spot. And just a series of somatic responses and reflexes happen, like a bunch of blinking and like swallowing and like mouth going like this, things like that. That's just like somatic responses indicating that there is a connection to the deep subcortical brain happening. Okay. And so he just stayed there. And what happened is, through just staying in this one spot, this ice skater processed just a ton of trauma that she had never processed before in any of the therapy that they had done, and went back and also processed stuff that she had processed previously in EMDR to a much deeper level. And then the next time that she went out and tried to do the triple loop, she did it flawlessly.
wow.
And they had been in therapy for something like 2 years prior to that, just trying to working on this. And she had just cleared a ton of stuff. And he realized he was onto something. And so he was like, okay, wow, what is this? And so from there, he just started to notice what would happen if he intentionally just stopped somewhere. And then he became more and more intentional and noticed different things. So Brainspotting has really kind of grown from that. And we've really learned a lot of things since those early experiments David Grand has done. Some of the things that we've learned is that the eyes are actually made from the same tissue as our brains. So our eyes and our brains are made from the same tissue. Brain tissue, eye tissue, same. Right?
Huh.
Very interesting. And so almost in a way, our eyes and our brains are like the same. So that's kind of neat. So Brainspotting also takes advantage of a really cool phenomenon that you might have noticed but never really paid attention to. Right now, I'd like you to think about a story, or I want you to think about what happened with a friend of yours, maybe yesterday. Like, think about your friend. Did you notice just now when you thought you looked up?
Yeah.
You looked at a brain spot where that spot is located. It's almost
No
like that
way.
memory is right there. And if you sat there long enough and you looked, other things related to either that friendship or what happened or other things related to that would be right there
Huh.
in that spot. And so Brainspotting, by me putting you on that spot intentionally, we can get some more processing. Now, with that, if I were to help you elicit some feelings or something that was going on. So for example, if we wanted to talk about specifically the situation that happened with your friend, right? We could talk about that situation, bring it up and help you have feelings about it. And once we did, we can really kind of bring that up to the surface. And then I can put you on a spot that was connected to those feelings. And you could process all of the trauma that was related to that. And when I say process, it's because I want you to understand that the brain is actually, it's actually divided into three major parts, okay? So I want you to imagine a head of cauliflower, okay?
Okay.
And so the head of cauliflower, the outside where all the florets are, that's like the cortex, okay? That's the outside of our brain, okay? That cortex part of the brain is the part where we do all of our thinking. That's where our empathy comes from, our insight, and that's where long-term memory is stored. Whenever we have something that we can think about, that we think about and no emotion comes up, like we don't feel sad when we think about it, we don't feel happy, we don't feel anything. We're just like, oh, okay, yeah, that happened last week. Like I ate some chicken. It was good. I remember it being good, but like I don't feel happy about it. I just remember it being good. you know?
Yeah.
It doesn't have any emotional content left to it. It's stored in our long-term memory. We can remember it being good. We can remember being happy, but we don't feel happy when we remember it. That means it's stored and completely processed and put in long-term memory. Okay? So that's in the cortex. So that head of cauliflower we're talking about, okay? The little stems that connect to that big stem in the middle, those little stems, that's our limbic system. And that limbic system is our emotional center of our brain. That's where all of the survival emotions come into play. Like that's where fight, flight, that's where all that starts from, okay? Love, anger, disgust, those feelings all come into play there. That's where we will have a lot of our feelings and our like trauma responses. That's where they kind of get stuck. Now that big stem, that's like our brain stem, and that's how our body and our brain talk to each other. So when we feel anxiety, right, when we have like a stress response, it starts out in our limbic system, but then we feel it in our body. Maybe we get pressure in our chest, or maybe we get tingling in our hands, or we get coldness in our hands, or our stomach starts to hurt, right? So that communication in our body is because of the brainstem, but the feeling originated inside of our limbic system. Okay? Now, the more intense those feelings are, our limbic system has the ability to go, cortex, you're just going to mess everything up and you do not get to be involved. And it will shut it off. It'll be like, boop, you are off. That's what happens when we get outside of that normal range, right? That's stuck on or stuck off. Okay? We're not able to access our cortex during that time. Okay? And so that's our limbic system saying, we are taken over. Now, what happens when we have that takeover is that when we have an event happen and we're in one of those like stuck on, stuck off moments, is that we can't actually process what happens to us and put it in long-term memory. We can only do that if the cortex is online. Right?
Got it.
And so what do? Well, the limbic system goes, don't worry, I'm going to put this here in a time capsule for you. I'm going to put it away for later. And it wraps it up in a nice little picture in a little capsule for you and saves it for the next time when you get triggered so that maybe you can file that away later. Right?
Yeah.
And then you get triggered. But of course, you never get triggered softly. You get triggered real good, right? And of course, the cortex gets shut off again. And now you got 2 time capsules in there.
Yeah.
Right?
Sense. Yeah.
And so now we've got like, I don't know, like basically time capsule crazy heaven is happening inside of our limbic system. And how are we ever going to deal with that?
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing where brain spotting comes into play, okay? Because after I find this spot, right, and I get the time capsule to open up, then what? Like, I'm just going to trigger you and I'm going to just make you go crazy? That doesn't sound very fair, right? So there's this really cool thing that happens. You were born with it. I was born with it, okay? Your body and your nervous system has the ability to do what's called co-regulate, okay? And that's because when you were a brand new baby, you had no idea how to calm yourself down. All you knew how to do was co-regulate. Your nervous system knew how to be around another nervous system. And if that nervous system was really anxious, you were anxious. If that nervous system was really calm, you were calm. All it knew how to do was act like other nervous systems. That's all it knew how to do. That was primitive. That was all it knew how to do. Okay? And so when you are in those emotional states, highly emotional states, That is the only thing your nervous system knows how to do. Either be completely dysregulated or be around another nervous system that is regulated and co-regulate.
Yeah.
And so that's my job as a therapist, is to keep my nervous system a very happy, safe place for your nervous system to regulate.
Interesting.
And so
Huh.
I use my nervous system and my connection with you through being very attuned with you, to being right here with you, to make sure that like, you know, I'm here, to you feel like you feel that I'm here. So you feel connected even when you're going through the worst possible crap again, and it feels like you're reliving it. You still know that I'm here. So your nervous system is like, okay, she's there.
Yeah.
And that calming presence of me helps your brain's cortex stay online. So even though you're going through it again, it's the last time you have to go through it.
That's awesome. Yeah, let's do that.
That's brain spotting.
That's cool. Yeah.